Welcome to the DMI interview series, Leaders in Defense Management. In June 2023, I sat down with Dr. David Chu, former Director of PA&E and Undersecretary of Defense. It was a great conversation touching on the role that PA&E plays in the management of the Department of Defense, among other issues. I hope you find it as informative as I did. I'm Peter Levine, the Director of the Defense Management Institute, and we're here today as a part of a planned series of interviews of individuals who have made significant contributions to improving the management of the Department of Defense. Today, we're speaking with Dr. David Chu. Dr. Chu, welcome. We're pleased to have you here.
Thank you for having me. Yes, but I don't blame the Congress entirely. Some of it is the result of the executive branch accepting some of the changes Congress has made. One I point to as being particularly destructive, in my judgment, is the proliferation of PAS officials at DoD. Now, of course, Congress moved to create undersecretaries starting in the late 70s as a movement, but never got rid of the underlying layer beneath it. And now we've seen an addition of more assistant secretaries underneath that layer. It's not clear to me that's a constructive step. It balkanizes offices within DoD. You create separate power centers. Few secretaries of defense, as you know well, control all the appointees in the department. So some are, I don't want to say political payoffs, but have a strong political content to them in terms of satisfying various stakeholder groups. It means that the incumbent may not really be someone who is loyal to the secretary, or the secretary, how the secretary interprets the president's agenda. So I think that is part of the problem, is the proliferation of offices. That's not helpful. I do think one issue is whether the emphasis by the Congress on the cost issue, which is in the title, so it's cost analysis remuneration, has sent the wrong signal to the department about the role of analysis. The most important function of the department, in my judgment, is not getting all the costs right, although that's a very important issue for DoD and a very important responsibility for CAPE, but is, back to, as I suggested, serving the secretary and his, eventually her deputy, as the analytic arm of their ability to set the agenda for DoD and to help devise alternatives, to help point out that there are other answers besides the ones that would otherwise be the system's preference. To me, the first and most important element is there a strong, trusting partnership with the secretary? Is the deputy really the secretary's person? Or even if the two have never met before, that they form a bond that is uh, extremely strong, and the deputy understands the secretary's intent, and the secretary understands what the deputy can contribute to the partnership. So I was blessed as I came to the department, so I became accustomed to that being the way the world should work. I could see it effective that way to that relationship. And you want that solid wall of coherence, as it were. And there is another side to that coin, if I may mix the metaphor here, which is, can the deputy go into the secretary, who may have either said something that's unfortunate, made a decision that's unfortunate, or is about to make a decision that's unfortunate, and say, boss, this probably is not going to work as well as you think. Can the deputy turn the secretary around? And that was also true of several of the deputies that I served. They had a strong enough relationship with the secretary that they could persuade the secretary, we're on the wrong path. We can back up here. I think it's very, very important. Yes, and I think that's true of many of these positions, maybe not all of them, that tenure matters. First of all, there's the issue of understanding the responsibility of the position. Even with some background in the area, and I did know a fair amount about military manpower issues when I came in, it does take 6 months to a year to understand the issues, to understand how the department grapples with those issues, to understand where the hill is on these matters, to figure out where, given the administration's agenda, what's feasible vis-a-vis the Congress, and where the budget will permit you some latitude, what can you do in solving problems. So if you're there only the standard 2 years or so that's typical of across agencies of confirmation appointees, you have only a year in which to make anything happen. Now, then you have the budget cycle and the legislative language statutory change cycle, which takes at le- except in emergent situations, is at least 6 months to a year, as you know, in terms of getting something to happen, to change, etc. You're never going to execute anything that you started. It's just not feasible. The timelines don't work. By the time you've learned what it was you should have asked for, you ask for it, fight for it, get some of it through the Congress, you're gone. I think the other thing, if particularly if you want to affect change, which I think is the issue that you're really headed toward here, uh, the benefit of tenure is that the other parts, because the other parts of the system turn over, military leaders turn over every 2, 3, 4 years. The other appointees turn over every 2 years or so. If you are there 3 years or more, you become the status quo. Now, that has some disadvantages, I grant, but also has some advantages. People say, well, at least he may understand something about what he's doing in this lane, give you a bit of the benefit of the doubt. They may also be convinced that you have more authority than you really possess in this regard, and therefore let you move forward in a way that would not otherwise be feasible. They might otherwise oppose what you want to do. So if you want to affect change, I think tenure is important, partly also because in my judgment, at least, in changing things, I do not believe in this come in and sweep everything off the table and try to start with a fresh sheet. Oh, no, that's not going to work. You just antagonize everybody. So you have to take the long view. You have to have a goal horizon, in my judgment, that's several years out, and that you work toward those conclusions as opposed to suddenly coming in with an agenda that you don't have the support to execute. If I'm allowed two, I'll offer them. One is, can it get its operating costs under better control? And I think that's partly a function of what I see the related question of the overuse of active duty military as the answer to every problem that it faces, instead of using some combination of reserve forces, civilians, and contractors who might be much better at carrying out the mission, depending upon the circumstances, but where there, for various reasons, there's an affection for the active duty solution. So cost control of operating costs, I think is a big problem. The other big question, as I indicated earlier, is, well, exactly what kind of structure and therefore what kind of weapon systems would be best to support American interests in the world going forward? And I remain convinced that we have not really found the answer. We're still, in my estimation, too much a prisoner of the platforms. Take the long view. This view that we have to solve everything in next budget submission is not very helpful. I mean, as you know so well, there's a real, despite PPBES and its effort to look out a few years, the next budget is so much governed by what you already are committed to doing. It's the budgets after that that you have a real opportunity to affect. Uh, and that's where the 5-year horizon is a real problem, in my judgment. So one of the things that I'm most proud of was the creation toward the very end of my tenure of what we call defense program projection. So we did, at that point, we were in a 6-year horizon mode, as you may remember from a biennial budget enthusiasm. And we therefore look out 3 6-year periods, 18 years. And we start with a very simple question. What would be required to finance current policy on an 18-year horizon? Which led to the first discovery, which is we weren't always sure what current policy was. So let's accept the force structure we have. Is the decision to buy airplane X, for example, a decision to replace every airplane in the current structure? Or is it, as many of the procurement documents say, we're going to buy X airplanes and somehow we will figure out what the structure will look like after we get them all on board? Wasn't clear in several buys. The Navy, of course, has long classically been reluctant to say how many ships of each class they're really going to buy, to say nothing of making them all the same standard ships so different crews could operate the same ship. They're basically custom yachts as a practical matter, creating huge manning and maintenance problems for the Navy over time. In my estimation, trying to get these things under control by taking the longer view. What's the longer term goal here? How are we going to get, which was the whole point in the beginning of the PBES system. The horizon 5 years is a little too short in my estimation.